Tonight, I am delighted to welcome Carmichael Roberts, who is a partner at Northbridge Venture Partners. But in addition to that, Carmichael is also a scientist and a co-founder of multiple companies. So he has incredible insights on both sides of starting a company, and really looking forward to having him spend the next couple hours with you, helping you understand what it takes to start a life sciences company. So I'm going to turn it over to Carmichael and let him get started. Thanks a lot.
All right, so to keep myself honest, to make sure I'm giving you things exactly the way they should be, I have a couple of plants in the audience who've worked with me for years. So occasionally I may look at them and they'll either smile at me or frown and tell me if I'm missing something. So tonight's topic, life sciences. Here's what I'm going to do. I've got an agenda where I'm going to go over, I think, some important points, at least points that I think are important in looking at an early stage, creating a startup, building a startup in life sciences. But the other thing I'm going to do is make sure I am talking about things that you want to hear about, and make sure I'm answering the kind of questions that you may have in your minds. But let's get started a little bit with the obvious component. So, creating and building a successful life science company. The question is, if we even think about this, is what's different between a life science company and, say, this is not a real question for you guys to answer right now, but what's the difference between a life science company and, say, an IT company, and what the challenges are, or what's the difference between a life science company and an energy company, and what are the differences in starting them, building them. And I'm going to try and contrast a little bit, but let me give a little better introduction of not just the topic, but give you an appropriate introduction of myself. So I am at Northbridge. I'm a general partner at Northbridge. My background is I'm a PhD chemist with a postdoc, actually locally here at Harvard in George Whiteside's lab, in materials. I'm going to call it materials and chemistry broadly in George's lab. And not only at Harvard, I also have an MBA from Sloan, from MIT. So I got a little smattering of everything. I worked in large companies, worked in small companies. Honestly, spent most of my time in small companies as a beggar from people like me, looking for money for the ideas and the ventures that I'm trying to get off the ground. And eventually, after about 12 years of doing small company stuff, something magical happened. I don't know how it happened. I went from being a beggar to a chooser, where I started getting calls from venture firms asking me what my next deal was going to be. And then one venture firm that was my most loyal investor was Northbridge Venture Partners, who said, I've got an even better deal for you. Why don't you come and be a general partner and do what you do in the entrepreneurial spirit of being an early stage person, but do it with the checkbook. And so that was a little over 5 years ago, and I've been at Northbridge as a general partner ever since. My area of focus, if you will, is just broadly chemistry and materials. So it's really not an area from a market standpoint, but it's more subject matter. But I will say probably the more unique thing that I've done at Northbridge is get the firm more and more involved in life sciences. I think if it was 6 years ago and you guys were sitting in this room and Northbridge came up as a firm, we wouldn't be talking about life sciences. And today we've got a bunch of life science companies that we do. So, but I've also been involved in energy related companies, electronics, and other industrial areas. So I can at least contrast the differences between one area versus the next. Northbridge as a firm is diversified, and Jody just mentioned Michael Scott. And for those of you who have seen Michael talk, Michael's one of the better, in my opinion, one of the best investors broadly in the software space in the country as my partner. But he would say he does very little or nothing in life sciences, comparatively speaking. So a very diversified firm. So I get a chance to see and compare notes with my partners on the different deals. So here's the agenda. In life sciences, let's make sure we're all thinking the same thing. I'm going to give you my broad definition of life sciences as I view it as a partner at Northbridge. Then I'm going to talk a little more deeply about the risks and rewards, and this is where things will get a little more interactive, because I want to make sure that we're not missing anything and that we're covering things that could be on your minds, either because you've got a company or an idea that you're a part of or been in one previously, or you may think that there's something really important that we should all keep in mind as it relates to the risks and rewards. And then the third point that I've gotten from some of our investors at Northbridge, so our limited partners at Northbridge, have often asked me, based on the recipe that I use for early stage startups, what do I see as the most important criteria or characteristics in building at least the basis of a successful small company, particularly in life sciences. And so I want to share with you at least my thoughts on what I use as a recipe for success. And in full disclosure, sometimes my recipe for success doesn't lead to success, but at least it's my recipe that most of the times has been pretty good. And then just to look at some company examples, just to get us talking a little more. I'm going to mention a few companies that I've been involved with that span different categories within life sciences. And then I've got, if we get to it and he doesn't mind me calling him up, I've got a live case study of a good friend who's worked with me previously on companies, PJ Annan, who's sitting here, who talks to me on a monthly basis, if not more, on how best to build his life science company, Alcyon, which I think would be a great example, since I'm not a card-carrying entrepreneur, without being a venture capitalist, that is. I'm both. And PJ is just purely out there reminding me all the time that he doesn't have a checkbook as he builds Alcyon. And then we can take any Q&A. So let's get started. I mean, here's the great thing about life sciences that I tell anyone who questions whether there should be venture capital investment in life sciences. If it's purely from the standpoint of making money, I mean, some of the most gigantic markets in the world are around, center and sit in life sciences. So I'm going to just name 4 broad categories and try and capture some of the subtopics that fall in their areas. Clearly, drugs are a big area. Whether you're talking about small molecules, which really fueled the biotech industry, along with biologics and large molecules, or whether you're talking about the tools that are used to identify these drugs and move them forward, whether you're looking at assays, which may or may not relate to tools themselves, or whether you're looking at delivery systems. And we can probably think of a lot of other things that can fall into that bucket. We can hopefully all give examples of companies that are worth a lot of money over the last 20 to 30 years playing in this particular slice of life sciences. Even further, probably one of the more interesting and hotter topics as of late, if you talk to venture firms and see where they're still actively interested in investing in life sciences, diagnostics broadly is still a very interesting area. Whether you're talking about analysis of bodily fluids, whether you're looking at genomics and genomic systems that have been advanced, whether you're looking one generation out at proteomics, I didn't put cellomics and tissue-based stuff, but you can put that up there. Whether you're switching over to looking at things that have more to do with electrical readings, like looking at electrophysiology, whether it's neuro-based diagnostics or cardiac-related. Forensics is an interesting area that a lot of people don't think about, or even imaging. If you think about GE and Siemens and companies of that ilk, diagnostics is a major area. And then I just broadly said devices. I was thinking more medical devices than diagnostic devices, but whether you're talking about implantable devices, devices that are wearable, which may have lower regulatory hurdles, devices that are minimally invasive and so are not permanent indwelling, or in some devices that maybe a broad category would just be non-invasive devices. Again, huge markets. And then there's healthcare IT, which actually at Northbridge is a singular focus in one of our areas. And healthcare IT, I just put a few things up here. I could have probably put 8 different topics up here that would fall underneath life sciences and healthcare. So the whole point is, hopefully we're on the same page. When I'm talking about life sciences, I'm talking at least about this group of examples and then some. And if I'm, what I did leave out for today's discussion are things like there's some people in some firms that describe life sciences as being as broad as biofuels. So I'm leaving out all the energy stuff that would clearly involve a lot of biology and Mother Nature related stuff, but I'm just talking things that have to do more with human health directly. All right. So key risk factors. When I talk to my friends in other VC firms, when I talk to my friends who are entrepreneurs trying to start companies or have started companies, what are the things that pop up that are often used as reasons to not do things in life sciences, reasons to be extremely concerned, reasons to be very leery about investing in them? And here are a few that I would say are some of the more common themes that pop up. The Mother Nature risk makes life sciences one of the more complicated areas to invest in, because if you're whether you're the entrepreneur trying to start off with it or if you're the investor wondering if it really works, what defines it really working? And so, biology is complicated. And, whether you're looking at the lab scale trying to prove something out, whether you're proving something out in animals, whether you're doing a small human clinical trial, or whether you actually have launched a product that you're convinced works, only when it's in thousands of people instead of hundreds of people, all it takes is one or two people to have a material adverse effect and your product can be completely shot, right? And so that's a scary thing. And so no question, there's a Mother Nature risk factor in life sciences. To tell you the truth, probably the biggest thing that scares venture dollars away from investing in the category often is the regulatory environment. I mean, if you look at regulatory strategy in biotech and pharmaceutical, in medical devices, even in a couple of regulated consumer-related devices, it's difficult dealing with the US FDA. It's extremely hard. I've got some friends who've developed successful multi-billion-dollar biotechs who tell me, even in their situation where they've gotten drugs to market, they have an extremely difficult time trying to figure out how to prepare for a 5-day session, with several people from the FDA and several panels. And so just imagine a small, little company, and I know several of you have probably experienced this. The whole idea of regulatory issues and the regulations moving makes it extremely daunting, and a lot of the work is done outside the U.S. because of that. Reimbursement is critical. Last thing you want to do is develop a product, convinced that it makes a difference, and it's hard to actually get paid with the product, and that's a non-trivial thing that pops up. I would say reimbursement is probably the one category of risk that I see entrepreneurs and people in small companies low prioritize and miss. And later on, it's the difference in whether you get paid what you deserve to get paid, or whether you get delayed and when you can actually get a product launched on the market. And then development, it's just expensive to develop the products. By the way, hopefully I'm not depressing everybody with all these risks that are sitting here, right? Because that's why I put the risks first. I'm going to put the rewards in a second so we can all feel good about the category. Clinical trials are expensive. Enough said there. And then manufacturing anything at scale, so it can be expensive depending on what you're manufacturing. And the other thing that's a risk, I will tell you, is from the entrepreneurial standpoint, is the competition for venture dollars, right? If the case to be made, I remember when I was in business school in 1998 and 99, and my friends used to say to me, some of my colleagues used to say to me, gosh, Carmichael, you have a lot of the entrepreneurial reflexes that you could be an entrepreneur in any category. Why in the world are you thinking about launching a life science company? You should do, at that time, you should do a .com company. And Nevin, I'm sure you can remember those days because you were right there as well, where just about anybody could do a .com company and make money very quickly, and yet no matter what you did in life sciences, it was just going to take longer because there were, these issues that you've got that are risk factors that are up top. And today, same thing, if you look at the amount of money that goes into, just pick something common, goes into getting a Facebook, to a certain point, why would you ever do a life science company? A lot of venture people wonder that. So those are the risk factors. I'm sure there are a lot more, but I would say these are the ones when I sat down and thought about talking today, and when I thought, and I started adding up all of the comments over the years that I've gotten repeatedly. These are the more common themes, and I'm sure you recognize some of them yourself. All right, now let me take a sip of water. That after all of this should be a sip of bourbon so I can get myself feeling much better about life sciences, right? Let's go on to the rewards and why I believe, why I'm here today. Why I believe people are crazy not to do stuff in life sciences. Well, we talked about earlier that the markets are enormous. But think about this. In 2012, $2.8 trillion was spent in healthcare in the United States alone. Now I can tell you again. Remember, I was mentioning at Northbridge, we're in energy markets, software. I mean, we're in some of the largest markets, an extremely diversified firm. When we add the numbers up and compare other areas, right, Jamie? This is my partner in the back right there, by the way. He used to be. I'm going to digress. Jamie used to be on my board when I was a CEO, and so he indirectly hired me. I always say that. So, the markets are gigantic. $2.8 trillion in healthcare alone. And if you dive a little bit deeper and you look at some of the applications for products, not all, but most of the individual applications, you can make a strong case for these products being greater than $500 million. Now there aren't a lot of market areas that you can say that about. And when we say most individual applications, we're not talking like 50, right? We all realize there are hundreds to thousands of applications that fall into this category. The other thing that's great about the area is that you're solving real problems. I mean, all problems can be real, but I mean, you're solving real problems. At the end of the day, if you had to choose between having someone give you I put it up here, I was just thinking off the top of my head, a new iPhone app versus removing chronic pain from a joint, that's a no-brainer. People are always going to pay for health in the end and care more about health in the end than anything else. And so, while fads come and go, like I mentioned .com, that's very old school. We're beyond that. The life science sector is permanent, or whether we would prefer not to have the issues that we have, but they are what they are. So real problems that don't disappear. And even though I've spent time on that previous slide, talking about, if we back up, all the risks that are associated in the area, these are all barriers to entry as well, right? And so what comes along with that complexity is those companies, those entrepreneurs, those individuals who solve problems in this area benefit from a barrier to entry, either through patents that are filed because you've come up with the right idea, brands. I mean, often people think about life sciences and they think that brands aren't important. Are you kidding? I mean, I can still see people buying Bayer aspirin in the stores, regardless of the fact that you see the generics sitting there, right? And so brands are powerful, and the cost that's associated with it. Even if you do, the money that's spent on a clinical trial. I mean, to simply come in behind someone and try and get a product on the market really quickly because you think you've seen a blueprint of how to do it, that's difficult, right? That's extremely expensive, and the only thing more difficult than getting someone to invest in a life science company with some of the risks around the product is to invest in the fifth life science company trying to follow behind a leader that's already got a substantial amount of the market, because it's hard to figure out, can you get there and steal some of it, right? The other thing that's great is when you look, as long as things are still on patent, erosion in margins and profitability is much lower risk in life sciences than any other area, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you've got a patent and you're addressing a particular need that's important, the idea that you're all of a sudden going to see a bunch of competitors pop up in a matter of months and then undercut you in price is very, very low risk. And so the margins are preserved through the complexity. So there's tons of reasons, tons of rewards in doing life sciences that in my mind overcome the risks as long as you can navigate and mitigate the risks. All right, so we talk about recipes for success, key factors. And really what I'm doing is trying my best to look at how one navigates the risk. So let's take a look at a couple of things that I've put up here. One thing that can be tremendously helpful around the Mother Nature risk is to have a world-class technical team. I could have said scientific team, but whatever the problem is, if you can get the best brains and the best minds behind it, then your risk in getting it wrong goes down tremendously, right? And so one thing that I think is really important, even if you don't have a technical background, I mean, find somebody in the subject area that you're pursuing who is expert and is passionate about your idea. And often I'll have someone say to me, well, Carmichael, listen, I don't have a PhD in chemistry like you have, or I don't have connections into some of the scientific founders that you've worked with. You know, how do I ever get something off the ground if I don't have, if I don't have that strong technical background or that strong technical lineage? And I would say that the answer is, especially in this environment in the greater Boston, Cambridge area, the scarcity in the equation of starting these companies is not finding the scientific founder or genius that's behind it. It's the entrepreneur that has the courage to launch something and then the conviction and the ability to sell the scientific founder to do it with them. So in other words, let me give you a prime example. Nevin, you're sitting here for a second. I got to say this, and I got to give you the mic because you got to answer this question honestly. I had no idea you were going to be here tonight, did I?
Okay, I don't know what your question is.
Oh, so it can't be done other than honest. So Nevin, you're here sitting in the audience in a life science discussion. What's your original background and degree? What's it in?
Molecular biology to architecture
To real
real
estate.
estate to now biotech business development.
Right, and when I met Nevin, thanks Nevin. When I met Nevin, Nevin was the prime example of someone who said, Carmichael, I've got no, now I got to figure out how to shut this thing off. How'd you? Oh, there we go.
It's real small.
Oh, got it. Yep. Nevin was a prime example of someone who was smart enough to go and, now I won't ask you this because I can tell people what you did. I mean, when Nevin asked me about who to work with and how to network and get life science companies off the ground because that's what he was passionate about. At that point, you have to admit a lot of your science had gone because it was an undergrad degree, right, from sciences from years past. And you went and worked with some of the more famous names in science and convinced them that you would be a good entrepreneur to help them get things off the ground, right? And I'd say you can establish a world-class technical team by not having a strong science background at all, but just being. And if you can't sell someone very credible on your topic, you probably aren't going to get very far in selling the concept, just generally speaking, as a litmus test. The other thing in the key risk factors is obviously intellectual property, right? Creating a picket fence around your idea, I think is critical. So from a Northbridge standpoint, if probably the second thing I look at after I look at the team is just quickly trying to figure out, is this concept protectable in a way that if we spend all this money and all this effort in developing something, the last thing I want is to find out we don't have freedom to operate the practice, or even worse, that someone else can just come in and do this or exclude us from doing it. So patents are important. And then pilot scale demonstration. And by the way, a lot of what I'm going to say is from the standpoint of a general partner and a VC firm investing, but I would say that, again, with the second greatest scarcity, I always remember this in my mind, the number one scarcity is the entrepreneur, right? It's the person who is wired and built to create these companies from scratch. The second scarcity, I always tell the entrepreneurs this, is the entrepreneur's time. And so, to spend 3 years on a problem, is a long time in your life to spend on a problem. So what you want to do is pick something that's got a real shot. So a lot of what I'll say today before I go to my third point on pilot scale is more than just what VCs look for. It's what I would tell you when I was an entrepreneur and realized that it's deeper than how do I convince somebody to give me money. It's if I'm going to spend a couple of years of my life, let me make sure I have my own set of criteria that I'm checking the box on, so that I don't, wake up and wonder what in the world did I just spend 24 months doing. The third thing that I think is very important is the ability to take something, even if you have it in a lab, even if it's a great lab. Like, for example, one of my, two of my co-founders I'll talk about today, and a couple of my companies were Bob Langer and George Whitesides. Fantastic labs. Maybe some of you have actually been in those labs. But there's a huge difference than in doing something, even in a well-resourced lab like Langer's and a well-resourced labs like Whitesides, and translating that into doing something at a pilot scale, where you're really proving something in an industrial lab. And so in that particular case, things that would come to mind are trying to get real animal data on a good animal model if it's a therapeutic-related product, or if it's something that's not therapeutic, just get robust data in general. Maybe it's an in vitro model. I think proving that as fast as possible to yourself is important. And then go out and talk to customers. I mean, here's the other thing that I think is an art to it. But you start these small companies, and you often wonder whether you should hibernate and hide and stay extremely stealthy because you're nervous about someone stealing your idea. And I was that way. There's no question about it. But then what I realized is, there's got to be a better approach to this. I really need to find out from, if it's a drug-related thing, I wanted to find out from Pfizer, from GSK, from Merck, from Bristol Myers, from Amgen, from Genzyme, from Biogen. The problem that I'm working on, how big of a deal is it? Is it such a big deal that you would die to work with me in co-developing it, right? If it's medical devices, I was quick to think about Boston Scientific, Medtronic, J&J, the old Guidant before they got acquired, which is now Abbott. The whole idea of getting out and being able to do customer collaboration, like I said, I think there's an art to it, but I think it's very important because for a couple of reasons. Look at the second reason I have down there. I think the expertise in regulatory and reimbursement is going to be key. Even if you can do it at the smaller scale, at some point it becomes too complicated for you to try and scale on your own. Now, there's always these exceptions of companies, but they're in the 0.1% where they've grown so big that they've done it all on their own. But for the most part, tapping into the regulatory and later on the reimbursement expertise can be invaluable. And then the money part. At the end of the day, one of the risks in these life science companies is the capital efficient manner that you develop the business. If you can collaborate with these large companies, even around a component of one of your applications, it can make a huge difference in the amount of money that it requires from the investors to develop your business, right? So I think another key success factor, do you have a path to customer collaboration? And last but not least, production scale demonstration in the field. If you can come up with a credible strategy that gets you to clinical trials sooner, quicker, again, in an efficient manner, I think that's a fantastic thing to do. I'll give a couple of examples of some companies that I've been involved with that have done that. And if it's not a clinical trial thing, if it's a device, just getting early customers sooner is a big deal. I've got a company that I'll talk about today called MC10, where we had to figure out how to do that in an area that's life science related, but get around the regulatory stuff. So let me stop there, and I'm going to eventually go into some company examples. But let me take some questions, if there are any, and around any of the topics that I brought up, because it could be things that you want to get solved, and I can give you my viewpoint from a venture standpoint. I can give you my viewpoint from a person who's been co-founder of, I think 8 companies at this point. Or I can keep going.
You talk about the importance of a team, but realizing that capital is so expensive, There's a lot of discussion these days about really kind of having a virtual biotech company and bringing that forward. Can you maybe share a little bit of perspective or your views on that?
Yep. So I'm going to repeat it back just so it's caught. You talk about a team, but sometimes a team doesn't. I'm going to add to it. I get exactly your question. Sometimes a team doesn't require a fully baked team. You can do stuff that's a little more virtual, right? So for example, a prime example, if you're talking about in biotech, is if you've got more of a development instead of a discovery part, if you've got more of a development business where you've got mainly clinical trials and eventually manufacturing, and a lot of the early stage discovery is already done. Do you really need a fully baked team, or can you have more of a skeleton virtual team to develop that business? And the answer is you can definitely. There are plenty of examples of having, one person instead of 5 people in charge of, the regulatory component and outsourcing a lot of the work. Same is true for having reimbursement experts that exist that you can hire as consultants. So I do think there are certain businesses that as long as you've crossed the line of proof of principle and early stage validation that you can do virtually. What I would say is, if your business is like most companies where there's still some technical risk associated with it, and if you go back to that, success factors, if a lot of these things like patent filing, pilot scale demonstration, customer collab hasn't been done yet, I would advise that you don't have too skinny of a team, and that you get really, really good people in house, and until you get at least that much stuff done.
So you mentioned there's an art to customer collaboration. Could you go into some more detail?
Okay, good. Yeah, it's a good question. So I mentioned that there's an art to customer collaboration. What do I mean about that art? Maybe I can give some examples. Maybe even maybe I could even use a couple of the case studies to illustrate. In fact, I promise I'm going to get to your question. I'm going to hold your question. I'm going to use it in a case study.
My question is about the revenue model. The revenue model for life sciences would not be necessarily the same as, say, IT. What is the one model that you like better than the others, or is it a specific one that you like better?
So revenue models in life sciences. So I'm going to go. That's a good question. So actually, it's one that even at Northbridge we don't struggle with understanding. We struggle with explaining it a little bit. So if we go back to this slide and we look at all the categories of things, revenue model is almost irrelevant in a couple of these categories, right? In terms of the early stage, first few years. So for example, if we look at the drug area, success in a small molecule or biologic-based company is not really going to be based on revenue model. But your question is very important if we're looking at something like, if we come down to something like healthcare IT. The revenue model is going to be completely different. Where at Northbridge we've got several companies in healthcare IT that we monitor very carefully in terms of the revenue model because it's closer to IT, as you mentioned, because it's a healthcare component of it. Whereas the way we look at our therapeutic-oriented companies is not at all to focus on the revenue, but there may be some other milestones that that we focus on that wring out the risk in other areas. Because the truth be told, the drug company or the medical device company that's got a product that's valuable may never see a drop of revenue in its existence before it gets acquired, right? In most cases. So in that case, we're not really focused on the revenue model at all. We're focused on what are those key, and this gets back to the customer question. It's what are those key things that need to be demonstrated in the eyes of large companies and experts in the field that have been there for a while to really build the value in it. Whereas in healthcare IT, you really need to get to a point where you've crossed, to give you an example, you've crossed a $20 to $30 million run rate in revenue. If you've done that in a healthcare IT company, chances are, not always, but chances are you've really gotten tapped into a vein of a business that you're making a big difference. Now, I don't know if I'm answering your question specifically.
You did. A follow-up question. So, for example, I've seen that in medical devices, there's this interest in pay-per-use rather than just investing all the capital. do you agree that pay-per-use is a good way of proceeding in medical devices?
So you know what you're going to do now that you started talking? I'm going to give you, because everybody in the room may not know what you mean by your terminology. Rather me do. Here you go. Just explain what you mean by pay-per-use.
Okay, so there are two ways to sell your product. You can either sell it at a very high price, and you can charge for maintenance, or you can sell it at a very low price, but then anytime someone is using your product, you get a share of the revenue.
Right. So
I think you could add a subscription model to that as well.
that's right. You can add a subscription model to it as well. And I think we can agree that we've seen companies successful with any one of the models that are mentioned. Whether you're talking about subscription, whether you're adjusting, whether you're getting paid a lot per use or not. And what I would say is, let me take the mic back from you. What I would say, generally speaking, is it depends on the business that you're in. But I think the key thing to keep in mind is what you just brought up, is there are a bunch of models for how you get paid. And one of the challenges, you mentioned medical device specifically, one of the challenges in medical devices versus drugs is the acquirers in medical devices actually want to see you, most of them want to see you get to a point where you've got real revenue and a model that's actually working. Whereas most of the acquirers on the drug side do not need to see you actually have a product on the market being sold. So if you look at the acquisitions, not in all cases, but if you look at the acquisitions that have been made in the last 3 years in the medical device side of things, I don't know, if I were to guess, PJ, would you say about 80% of them are revenue-based companies where they had to get to revenue before they got acquired? Would you agree?
Or they have that traction, that signal is very strong, the revenue track is going up.
Yeah, or they've at least begun to get revenue, and you can tell that the growth is pretty high. So I think in the case of devices, to answer your question, I think you should consider all the models, including subscription, by the way, and then see which one fits the business best. And I've seen examples where you can pick one for one kind of business or one for another business, and it works fine. But you should be open-minded to it.
I think there's a broader point here, what you taught me, which is at the early stage, what you really want is optionality. You want multiple shots on goal. So, you really have to make a decision on what your revenue model should be at an early stage. The idea is to really leverage all that optionality and narrow it down to what best works for you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If there's any value in what's called preventative health, where you're eating right or exercising right. Yeah, the only thing that I can come to mind is maybe like Runkeeper. Are those types of business models something you think are valuable that VCs would invest in, or that you think has in general has a place in the market?
Yeah. So the question is, we talk so much about technology-driven companies. What about, to take your point, what about businesses that are more around habits and trying to change the way you behave to have an impact on your wellness, right? And are VCs investing in those sort of companies? And so we've got Northbridge has a company called Healthrageous that does exactly that. There's always some technology behind what you're doing, right? But in this particular case, the main thrust is trying to figure out how to tie into the healthcare system, but specifically within companies, typically large companies with a lot of employees, where if you can just change habits, you can show in your, with some small IT solution that there are major, major dollars being saved. And so the answer is, yeah, I mean, I've seen several companies being invested in that way. Yep.
I have two questions. One is a follow-up to Mark's first question, and that is, if you're a virtual startup biotech and you're looking for money, what is the minimum viable team that you would like to see at the table?
Okay, so if you're a virtual biotech, how many people do you need before, typically before a life science VC is going to invest in it? And their function. That was exactly where I was going to go. So if I was, instead of giving you a general answer, if I had to give you the exact number, I would say at least 3 people. I mean, that's about as small as you can imagine, and I'm going to name the people that you'd want to see. I would say a CEO, and if for the to be the CEO as the only business person, meaning when I say the only business person, meaning anything dealing with the CEO needs, in that case, that CEO needs to be very good at doing deals. You can outsource the finance function for it, so you could probably have a CFO consultant instead of hiring, but then that CEO has to be very adept at the operation side, the finance side, and being able to manage that. So pretty much one senior person doing all the business, right? Let's call it the CEO. Then I would say have someone in charge, and it has to be a very, very good, nimble person to do this, of both the regulatory and just broadly speaking, the medical strategy. And then the third person, I would say, it would be in charge of manufacturing, assuming there's something that you're making. And then you need a bunch of consultants. So I can't imagine less than 3 people. So to answer your question literally, I would say no less than 3 people. But I've seen very good organizations have around 6, probably around 6, where those functions that I just mentioned, maybe there are a couple of people that are in those functions. But certainly I've seen less than 10 in that particular case. And it all depends on how many programs. Not just how many programs, but how diverse the programs are in terms of the clinical areas. But you could do it, you could do it not a lot of people. Second question.
The second question I had is, if you're a therapeutics company and you have a platform that's broadly applicable, do you like to see it the platform, or do you like to see product driven?
So they're both smiling. All 3 of them are smiling because they know my answer to that one. And I'm going to give you my answer, and then I'm going to do a favor to everybody and tell them that I'm alone a lot of times on this answer. I like to see platform, a platform approach. Let me repeat the question. The question is, if you're a therapeutics company, and for that matter, let me just say, in my opinion, if you're any one of these, any category here, but let's stick with therapeutics. Would I prefer to see a product-focused company? Maybe it's got a single product, maybe it's got a couple in a very narrow theme, or would I rather see a platform company that, let me add on to it, that absolutely is going after products, but it's very clear that there's an enabling platform that's behind it. It's not just the technology being licensed. I would much rather see the platform to products approach than the narrow product focused company. And if I were to, now the reality is, at least 80% of venture capitalists would give you the opposite answer. So the question is, why in the world am I more on the platform side? And I'll tell you why. So one of the things that I always wondered is, what do VCs really do? Before I became one, I would ask myself all the time, what do they really, in fact, let me tell you, there are times when I used to think they don't do much. And I'm glad Jamie's not in right now because he was my board member, but I wasn't thinking that about him. But then I became, I realized that very good venture folks actually do a lot. And, but there are certain things, certain themes that are indoctrinated into VCs' heads. And if you ask them why, and I've had the opportunity to ask them why now from the venture standpoint, the answers aren't really good. So for example, I asked the question, why is it that you want companies to focus on a single product or a narrow product concept? And they say, well, focus is important, Carmichael. You said it in your own words. Focus is important. And I would ask one step beyond that. Well, why is focus so important such that you would confine the company deliberately to focus on a single product instead of multiple products? I said, well, what do you mean? I said, why not get a great management team that has the ability to take a portfolio of stuff and figure out how to manage that? Why artificially constrain the management team by telling them they need to focus on a single thing so you could sleep at night because they're focusing because they have no choice but to focus because there's only one thing that they've got on their mind. I'd rather give them choices. And PJ mentioned earlier, he knows it's a big theme of mine, optionality. And here's the reality. What I said to myself is, when I become a venture capitalist, I'm not going to change the principles that I had as an entrepreneur, right? I still want to look at people right in the eye and tell them, what I'm telling you to do is exactly what I would do if I were in your shoes. And the truth is, VCs have portfolio management as well, and the best way to manage the portfolio is to have, 50 companies doing one single thing. Because in the worst case scenario, if 10 things don't work out of your 50 companies, if 40 of them work, you're fine. In fact, if 10 of them work really well and 40 of them don't work, you're fine. But if you're the entrepreneur in a company, what do you want to do to manage your risk, right? If your company is the one that blows up out of the 50, you're not feeling too good about that, right? Now, and so the truth be told, I think you can kill two birds with one stone. I think portfolios are better off not having an enormous amount of lack of focus. I mean, that's not a good thing. But you'll see in a couple of examples that I give. I think you can have an ability to create, you can have a platform with real products, more than one product, and still have focus and operate a business. And I think that's better off in venture, and I know for a fact it's better off as being the operator. And especially the therapeutics company. I mentioned the mother nature risk. You pick a single product and have it go wrong. You spent 4 years of your life on that one single compound, and it goes wrong. It's binary. You're done. And I personally, never did that. So you see, that's the longest answer I gave tonight. So that one's passionate to me. It's a good question. Yep.
One of the problems with the platform is you need huge amounts of money because, I have a company, we are focusing on platform, but the advice we got was, focus on one product, but keep the platform alive. And when you make progress with one platform, then you get more money and then you can focus on a different set of products.
So I think that was good advice. That's one way to do it. So let me repeat back, because what you said is a way of doing what I described. So wait, I'm going to start asking people's names. What's your name?
It's Anupam Dokinian.
Holy cow. I'm going to call him Anu. I'm going to call Anu. Here we go. Yeah. So what Anu said was, you like that? And I said, holy cow. So what Anu said is this. It's like, look, one strategy, I'm going to take what you said and just paraphrase a little bit. One strategy is to have a platform, own the platform, keep it alive, but focus on a single part of the platform, and then later on roll out the other components. I think that's smart. But in that case, you still have a broader platform. If something goes wrong with that lead program, what do you do?
Well, to be arrogant, it won't go wrong because we already have some.
Okay, good. So,
but no. Yeah, we have.
You have other stuff.
No, we have other stuff to fall back on.
Yeah, I'll just tell you quickly, just a quick story on something. So my first small company that I was involved with is a company that was in Waltham called Gelex Pharmaceuticals. Now, Gelex was a company, again, it was started by George Whitesides at a Harvard lab. And the platform that we had was the idea that polymers could be drugs. So, it doesn't sound like a revolutionary thing, but I want you to think, this was in the 90s. And the concept of polymers being drug at the time, when you look at a tablet, George used to always say to me, I don't get it, Carmichael. You look at a tablet and 5% of it, maybe 10% of it is the active. And then you've got all the rest of this real estate that's inactive. Now, eventually drug delivery systems came about, and so that wasn't quite the case. But in terms of actually being the active component in a pill, that was the case, where the bulk of your tablet is a polymer that just gets excreted and the active ingredient gets absorbed into your bloodstream. So Gelex was formed with the concept that you can use a polymer as a drug. And then what we did is we did one of these slides, right? What are all the reasons that you couldn't have a polymer as a drug? Anyhow, to make a long story short, one of the major reasons that you wouldn't have a polymer as a drug, there were two big ones that kept popping up when we went to talk to customers. One was these polymers, when they're in the bloodstream, may not break down fast enough and be excreted. So maybe the liver enzymes don't chop these polymers up fast enough. Now you've got something that if it was injected into your, directly, whether it's IV or otherwise, that's floating around and not going to be cleared, which is a major issue from a safety standpoint, right? So one thought was they're not going to be safe like small molecules. These gigantic polymers will stick around and cause problems. The other issue was that they couldn't be made to be specific enough to bind to a single thing. So these little small molecules could be made to bind specifically to a particular protein in a certain spot. These gigantic polymers, they would never be specific. Some of them are bigger than the proteins themselves, so they're just going to glom onto everything. Anyhow, I'll just tell you where this company ended up. This company ended up getting acquired by Genzyme for $1.3 billion. And we were convinced that the initial product, by the way, we were completely wrong what I'm about to tell you. We were convinced that the initial product was the killer application. It was a cholesterol-lowering concept. So what this polymer would do is, because it was so big, when you swallowed it in a pill, it would go into your GI tract, it would coat your small intestine, and when it coated your small intestine, things that were in extremely high concentration in your bloodstream, right, that for some reason, let's say you had chronic kidney failure. You had a problem with your kidney, so your body's natural filter is not removing certain things. So now you got things in your bloodstream at high concentrations that shouldn't be because your kidneys aren't working. It turns out when things are extremely high concentration in your kidney, from chronic kidney failure, there is a rapid equilibrium at that interface on your small intestine where things actually rapidly leave and go into your small intestine, but then get absorbed so quickly you don't really see that it's going in and out. So, in other words, if you had a polymer coated in your small intestine sitting there, and something was in your bloodstream that left that you didn't want to return, maybe you can engineer that polymer to bind that thing and not let it go back into the bloodstream, right?
Carmichael, I was the product manager who launched Spelmer.
Oh, there we go.
I was hired by Tim Noyes. That product ended up being $750 million worldwide.
Exactly. There we go. So, and you'll be the first to say that product in what indication? It wasn't cholesterol. It was.
No, it was a phosphate binding agent for dialysis patients.
That's right. So I remember, talking to. Actually, I remember you have to remember this clear. I remember talking to Mark Skeletsky around what some of the risks were in the products, right? And one of the key, and this is when the company was public, and the stock price wasn't anywhere near $1.3 billion, and I remember clearly, the thought was there's no way that this phosphate binder could ever be a product worth more than $25 million. And the thought was it was a replacement for Tums, as you can probably remember, right? You remember this? So the thought was this is a replacement for Tums, which provides calcium that binds to these phosphates. So the worldwide sales of, or at least the US sales of Tums was something like $25 million as it relates to this particular indication. And you probably remember there's one doctor locally, a guy named Joe Bonventuri, who's one of the top kidney docs. In fact, he's head of renal locally here, who said, that's crazy. There's all sorts of problems with taking Tums. This is going to be a much bigger product than that. Now, at the time, the cholesterol product at one point was thought to be a huge market because the statins are gigantic, right? Pfizer's product was, small molecule product grew to $14 billion in sales. So I'm going to come back to the platform thing. Had that company been 100%, in fact, in the end, do you remember what the sales were? I mean, it finally got up a little bit. The sales in cholesterol were $150 million eventually for the cholesterol selling product, $700 million for the renal product. Had we focused 100% on the cholesterol product, I am absolutely positive Genzyme would not have purchased the company. No way. And and the company wouldn't be what it is. So that's an example of where just having some options and being able to put more than one thing, into a trial, made a huge difference because it turns out that the second product was the big killer application, which I think is the way you've developed a company, even in therapeutics as an example. So, all right. So, any more questions? Do you want to go through some examples of? Oh, here we go.
Could you spend some time on, you talked about like the late stages of the startup. What about the early stage? It seems like only PIs in their labs can actually do the pilot studies. So what about postdocs and other research scholars where we have an idea, but we're looking for an incubator space to actually do what we're thinking of, but our PIs probably are not very interested in that because they want the Nature publication and not necessarily the startup company.
Okay, so I'm going to take a paraphrase what you're saying. So, like if you're a professor, let alone a big professor somewhere, if you've got an idea you want to do something, you probably have a lot of ability to do it. But what happens if you're the graduate student, the postdoc, or the PI who's not the professor? You've got an idea that, in fact, your professor probably says, hey, I don't want to, I'd rather just publish it, or I don't even want to do what you've got as an idea. What are some of your options in that particular case? So, I want to tell you, it depends on what exactly the concept is. But it's funny that you brought it up. I was talking to somebody over at MIT earlier today about the same exact thing, where he has you probably do too, a real live example of himself being in that situation. If it's something that's an idea that doesn't clearly fall underneath the concept of what that professor is doing in their lab, I go back to my advice. I would find someone who perhaps is a professor who would like to develop, a small company concept, and figure out how to work with them on the concept, assuming that your advisor, the advisor, wouldn't mind you working on it. In fact, you can even, in some cases, I've watched this happen. You don't have to cut the original advisor out. You can say, hey, we need you to be part of this, but you don't have to worry about distracting resources in your lab. We're going to do it in so-and-so's lab in a collaboration. So figure out how to collaborate with another group and do it smartly, where you're picking somebody who actually has a passion to develop the concept. And then you got the best of both worlds, right? You've got your original PI who's happy because you got a good collaboration, some papers are going to come out, and you've got a professor who is passionate about maybe developing that. The other thing to do is, for example, I gave that Gelex example on the polymer. The reality is none of that work was done at Harvard at all. That was a concept that was first tried out for less than $1 million in a small lab facility to a proof of principle. And if the idea is that interesting, there's an opportunity to do that if you can find the money for it. I wouldn't hesitate to do that. Yeah. Any more questions on it? Otherwise, I'm going to try and make sure I answer your question in the company examples. All right. So I'm not going to necessarily go through all these company examples, but I want to give at least a couple. I'll go through as many as you. But I am going to talk a little bit about platforms, life sciences, collaborations, and answering the question of how you have focus, but on a constrained budget, do multiple things. I'm going to talk about this company, MC10. So let me give you a background. So MC10 is a company that was founded, I guess it must be about definitely no more than 4 years old. And the concept is high performance electronics in every size, shape, and product. But the key innovation in the company is this stretchable form of silicon. So let me hop to what a product could be, and then I'll talk about the stretchable form of silicon. So just imagine that instead of having silicon being hard and flexible, imagine it almost like creating saran wrap, right? And if you've got something that has the performance characteristics as an electronic material like silicon, and if you can actually have it as a form factor that's almost like a saran wrap that you can wrap around something, we can clearly wrap it around parts of our bodies. We can wrap it around organs. We can put it on the ends of devices, have it be a component of devices. All of a sudden now, you can take silicon and think about all the electronic implications of a product that previously couldn't be thought about because silicon is thought of as inflexible and hard, right? So that's the innovation behind the technology. In terms of products, there are multiple products. So you're talking about a platform. I picked this company because it is about as broad conceptually as a platform as you're going to see a venture capital group invest in. So the markets are, in some cases, not even related, right? Energy to medical to consumer products. Sounds like GE, not like a small company, right? And the way and I'm going to go into the art of collaboration, the way you can develop a company that's got that many applications on a limited budget is to collaborate. And the key thing, the other point I like about platforms is it offers you the opportunity to collaborate, right? If you've got a single product, especially in the life science area, the idea of collaborating could be death to the upside of your company, right? So if you've got a product that's got multiple indications in oncology, maybe something in cardiovascular disease and something in neurology, you can afford to take one of those areas and partner out the entire area and fund your company in a major way, and maybe give up, who cares, 75% of the upside, depending on what the area is, right? Because if all of a sudden that gives you $30 million of cash to develop the rest of the business with only $10 million of venture capital to match it, it's worth it if you can, match and mix and match the portfolio, right? And so in this case, in this company, MC10, going backwards, we looked at these areas which have multiple products in each of these areas and thought the only way we can really develop the company broadly is to show commercial progress through collaborative deals with major companies. And so, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The interesting thing is the first product that's being launched is a life science related product in the sense that it's biologically oriented, but it's an impact monitor for concussion. So, and I'm going to talk about some of the medical products in a second. But the thought was, what's an industry that you'd never imagine, say, an MC10 technology going into that is on the fringe of life sciences, but doesn't have some of the issues associated with the regulation. So the company picked a diagnostic-oriented product, right? So something that's going to monitor concussion, picked an industry area that doesn't require regulatory as long as you're not diagnosing the concussion, but you're diagnosing the impact. So in other words, this product that's just being launched now goes on the heads of football players, hockey players, headbands of girls playing soccer in high school, lacrosse players, boys and girls. And if there's a collision, what it measures is the jarring impact to the brain, right, through an accelerometer that's basically attached with all these electrodes to the head. But it's a stylish cap that you'd actually want to wear. You can't see the silicon that's embedded into the material because, like I said, it's a flexible silicon that can not only fit in Saran wrap, it can fit in things like spandex-like materials. So it's monitoring impact, which then gives you a colorimetric readout. Right? The light either turns green or it's red, telling you need to then get checked to see if you've had a kind of impact that could result in a concussion, that you've had a concussion. So in that case, they completely get past all the regulatory stuff, right? And what that product is, and I can't go into the terms of this deal, but they gave up a component of the upside, maintained part of the upside, but what they now have is validation on the technical platform, and then the ability to actually develop products like this where they can own a lot more of it. So just taking a look at this, can anybody, this is a little Q&A, anybody figure out what this product is that has MC10 electronics on it? So you're close. So because that's an application, a stent. It's not a stent, but it is something that would impact vascular lumen. So if it's not a stent, what is it?
It looks like a balloon for angioplasty.
A balloon for angioplasty. That's exactly right. So this is a balloon, a medical balloon, right? And where it's used, this particular balloon is used for determining the placement of that balloon in real time, and then if you need to, you run a balloon up to a particular spot. Just so imagine that, for example, imagine that you needed to ablate some part of a blood vessel because you have an irregular heartbeat, right? And so in that particular case, say you have an irregular heartbeat, the way they would normally treat it is to run a balloon up to a certain area, identify where there's some mismatch in, I'm trying to use general terms here, mismatch in firing of electronic signals, in that particular blood vessel leading to your heart. And what they typically do is cauterize some path so that that signal is not being given. Now, it turns out that the way that therapy is done today is to have multiple products being run up that lumen to determine where to put the balloon and then to determine where to actually zap the patient in that blood vessel. But if you can put high-fidelity electronics directly on the balloon, you can both map and zap that same area in real time with one single product. And so in this particular case, you can imagine that MC10 does a deal with Reebok on a bunch of sports-related products, gets revenue from that, gets the technology validated, owns the upside in other products like this balloon catheter, right, that can be used in electrophysiology. You can also use a product like this in neurology and a bunch of other applications, right? So this is an example of a company that's done deals almost immediately. And of course, PJ can attest, I say immediately, he knows how hard it is to actually do deals because he was my chief business officer. One of my companies responsible for the art of doing these deals. And let's stop here and just talk about the art. Let me show you one more product. Okay. All right, another guess. What is this? What is this electronic sitting on? Skin, right. So this is MC10 calls this a biostamp. I actually had to do a TEDx talk with I did a TEDx talk with my son recently, who's 9 years old, and he told the audience and his friends that this is an electronic tattoo, so which I think catches the mind a little bit better. So yeah, I mean, this is directly on the skin. It could be peeled off, and you can imagine all the kinds of things you can measure if you've got something like that mounted directly onto your skin, right, with things like silicon. So let me stop for a second and talk a little bit about the business development. As an aside, the interest in this. Well, let me poll the group with you. Let's talk about the art of collaboration. So imagine that you're part of the management team at MC10. You've got this product, or at least this platform that could be multiple products. Who would you go and talk to collaborate with this kind of technology? There's no wrong answer. So you're part of my business development team. Where are you going with this product?
The Department of Defense.
The Department of Defense. I like that. For what? What do you want to do with the DOD? What are you telling them?
I mean, they'd be interested in so many variety of things with that.
Yeah.
And
monitoring it. So by the way, that's one of the groups they went to. So the Department of Defense, where you can imagine that either for the protection and monitoring of soldiers or for tracking of people who don't know they're being tracked, you can imagine that you can embed something like this, and it can be removed quickly without being detected. So DoD is an example, and the company's got millions of dollars worth of collaborative revenue with the government for that exact thing. Where else would you go?
I'd almost want to talk to a CRO to see how this type of product could be integrated into clinical trial management or patient management there.
I like that. So a CRO, right? And how do you do patient? I like that. How do you do patient monitoring and management? And it could be someone in clinical trials, no question about it, right? So that could be an interesting deal that maybe you would cut.
Sunscreen companies.
Oh, that's a good one. Sunscreen companies. That's actually an active discussion going on right now, right? So sunscreen companies, in fact, both, I'm trying to think about what I can say and can't say. But you're absolutely on to something. Remember you said that, and if you ever want to watch something over the next 3 months, or maybe the next 60 days, there'll be an announcement of a company collaborating with MC10 for let's just say broadly cosmetic applications, right? Any other thoughts? By the way, mind you, we're just on one.
Oh, why? I don't know how expensive that would be, but video game companies, because they're always looking for all kinds of sensor stuff that they're doing, and wellness companies, huge wellness thing.
There's going to be an announcement on the wellness one too, right? And video games, exactly. What can you do with video games with this sort of product? All off of this stretchable silicon platform, right? And you could imagine doing the deals with each one of these companies and going to them and giving them a compelling reason why they should want this technology, and not worrying that you've given away the entire company because it's not a single product focused company, right? So, and as it relates to give you a little more insight of the art of doing these collaborations, I think a lot of it centers on doing homework before you go. Like, let's take any one of these ideas. Let's take the sunscreen idea for a second. So we went a little bit deeper. Let's stick with that. So we wanted to go a little bit deeper on the sunscreen idea. So we're the business development team as a whole in the room, looking for this life science application around sunscreen. What companies come to mind? By the way, there's no wrong answer on this one either. It's whoever decides that they want to get involved in the business or in the business already. Sunscreen, who would be interested in that? By the way, I can cheat because I know who all the ideas that have come up. Like I said, there's no wrong idea, and if no one answers, I'm going to end up putting Oopma on the spot.
What about cosmetic companies like L'Oreal and so on?
That's an excellent answer. Cosmetic company like L'Oreal, right? Or Estee Lauder. And I can tell you, L'Oreal is one of the companies that is at least in conversations, because that's not confidential information. That's an excellent answer. Who else would be interested in sunscreen, or any kind of? Yep, Neutrogena would be a good one. So let me even stretch the mind a little bit further. Let's think about the sports stuff that I mentioned, right? And I'll even broaden it out a little bit further and say, what else could you measure besides just sunscreen? What else could you measure if you've got something sitting on someone's skin like this? Yep, blood sugar for sure.
Yeah, sun exposure, salt. You can measure dehydration and also drug levels.
Yep, all those things are important. You rattled off a whole bunch of them, right? Salts, you can look at electrolytes, you can look at dehydration, you can look at drug levels. I got to tell you, somebody walked up to me and said, "We'd love this product for steroids." And I said, You think someone would use this for steroid monitoring? And they said, no, Carmichael, we love this product for getting away with using steroids. Blew me away. I said, what? They're like, no. I said, listen, that's not what I want my stuff being used for. But they said, yeah, because you could actually monitor. You could use this to monitor things very precisely, right? So think about this. Let's stick with electrolytes for a second. Hint, hint. Who else would you go to with this product? Right, Gatorade, right, or Powerade, and someone like that, right? So anyhow, off of this one, you brainstorm on ideas like that. You think about why it would be important to them, and you think about an entry point, and you go in and you talk to these companies. And the reality is, 19 out of 20 times, I don't know, at least 9 out of 10 times, but 19 out of 20 times, you probably end up in a situation where you don't get anything done. But if you have enough of these concepts and enough of a compelling case, all you need is 1 out of the 20, and it can make the difference in the company, right? So let me. I'm gonna skip Ashan for a second.
Question in the back.
Yep.
So the sensor, you presuppose that it might have application for sunscreen.
Yep.
So before you talk to Neutrogena, have you already built a picket fence around the use of that for monitoring UV?
You probably, that's an excellent question. Have you built a picket fence? You probably haven't built what I would classify as a picket fence, but you probably filed or at least have disclosures on a few of the concepts that you think are most obvious, and probably the broader concepts. But the reality is, and this is what I get at with the subtlety of getting the art and the subtlety of knowing that you should go and have the discussion. The reality is, until you start talking to Neutrogena or to Gatorade or to Reebok or several L'Oreal and whoever, you really don't know what needs to be developed. As much as you think you know, you just don't know. You really don't know, and it's amazing. There's a large, let me just say, so let me tell you exactly what I think most people should do in the case of going after an area that you're probably not that familiar with. First thing is, think about the obvious applications. Then maybe get a group of consultants or advisors together. And even if it costs a little bit of money, pay them for a brainstorming session where all sorts of great ideas come out that could be translated into, disclosures that could be converted into patent applications. Two things will happen. There's a 1% chance you ever need that intellectual property to protect yourself against a large company. But in the case that you do, you've got it. But what's more likely to happen is ideas that you never thought about as part of that brainstorming session. So you get a 2-for-1 in that particular case. Then go out and talk to the large companies, and what you find is, let's pick anyone, Gatorade. What are the chances that Gatorade has the ability or desire to develop a product like this, themselves? Right? Very, very low. This is not their core competency, right? So as much as you fear, oh my God, I got a great idea, they're going to steal it from me and try to use it, you need to be a little bit paranoid. But the reality is, if you have this if you can convince them that you are super smart around this technology and that you've already had the concept and you've already begun to build your patent base, chances are you're safe. And chances are in the dialogue, you're going to get better information that they're not going to necessarily invent, but they may point out applications that later on you can go and invent, which is why I encourage people to figure out how to do more of that than to hunker down and not have dialogue. And then I'll come right here.
And then the follow-up to that then is, so then Neutrogena, what's the deal look like? They give MC10, was that the name of the company, money to move the product forward as a skin sensor, or do they license the IP outright for a percentage of the company, or both?
So, what does that deal look like? I mean, the reality is it could be either. So part of it is, what is the large company most comfortable doing, and what is the small company most comfortable doing, right? And so in the case of, let's stick with Neutrogena, I like that example. I can't imagine them wanting to license the technology and develop it. I can't imagine them wanting marketing rights around something, exclusive marketing rights around something, and wanting to make sure that it's not, if they let the small company do it, that it's not single source to the small company, that there's some way that there's maybe multiple spots that are manufacturing the product. So, because what Neutrogena cares about is if they roll that product out with their name behind it, they don't want to hear that the little company screwed up in the manufacturing and can't provide enough of that product because maybe one of these plants or one area, had a fire or something like that. But for the most part, if the competency of the large company is completely orthogonal and different than the technology platform, the chances that they're going to want to license it is pretty low. They're just going to want marketing rights and do what they do great, which is, to get it out, in the customer interface. Now, if instead you wanted to, say, do a deal with, you guys pick whatever company you want. Let's pick J&J just for the heck of it. You want to do a deal with Johnson & Johnson's medical group around this product. Yeah, they probably are going to look at some point and say, you know what, once we get to a certain spot, we want to license the thing and we want to manufacture because we know a lot more about that kind of a medical product than you do, if this is the one that you are actually trying to partner. So I think it depends on the partner. And by the way, if you're a little company, remember I went back to, my last thing down in the bottom, last couple of things is expertise in regulatory and reimbursement and scaling up. I think doing a deal with a large company is not a bad thing as long as you can get the economics right.
Just a very quick question. The skin has wonderful properties, but it has three unfortunate problems. It sweats, it exfoliates, it goes bad. So your sensor, can you just very briefly say what the characteristics are for adhesion and the systems of operation in application?
Yeah, so it's a good, skin's got some great properties, so I'm just repeating the things so everybody hears you. So skin's got some great properties to it, but it also has some challenges. Like eventually, things slough off of your skin by design, right? So this is no different. What happens if, how do you deal with some of the issues, and what are the fundamental properties of this that allow it to deal with some of the things you brought up? So this is not a permanent device. So you design this, and another thing I should tell you is, in between what makes this thing adhere and you can't see it is a transparent tape. So think about the kind of things that 3M makes that are transparent tapes that would serve as the backplane for this product. And those tapes are already designed to deal with a lot of the issues that you're talking about. So a company like 3M will design an adhesive that deals with all of those issues, and then you can mount the electronic component directly onto, even if you paid for the adhesive as part of the transfer price into your product. That's how you would deal with it. Okay. All right, so let me, just in the interest of time, let me give one more example. I'm going to skip two, and then I'm going to ask PJ to come up and talk with me for a little bit. So here's a company called Arsenal Medical that I started about, and it must have been 6 years ago, with George Whitehead and Bob Langer, and this is a broad scientific concept, and it was really off the heels of that Geltex example that I used, which was actually, let me back up and say the whole idea of polymers being drugs was unusual, but what we also learned was the idea that polymers, even back in the 90s, we could see that polymers could be actually very interesting medical devices with mechanical properties. And so this is before the drug-coated stents came along. And at that point, we were looking at markets where most medical devices, the mechanical properties were not tooled in through the polymers, tooled in mainly through metals. And in fact, material science was an afterthought to a lot of the medical device products, certainly in the early to mid-90s. And our thought behind Arsenal was, what if a chemist or a material scientist dared to design a mechanical product and then work with mechanical engineers and electrical engineers around it as compared to coming in afterwards? Anyhow, broad concept. We didn't know what products we were going to develop. But I had George Whitehead and Bob Langer, so I got funding on a crazy idea. And that's the truth of the matter, on a crazy concept. And unfortunately, I had a very good team. So let me tell you what ended up happening. Out of that Arsenal Medical, companies began to come out, more than one. And I just want to talk about one company called 480 Biomedical that took that concept of what happens if a material scientist and a chemist dares to design a mechanical-based medical product. And fortunately for us, go forward, one of the concepts that began to be hot are this whole idea of bioengineered materials that disappear. So, one of the negatives in medical devices, especially implantables, is that once you put in the screw, once you put in most stents, I know you mentioned stents earlier, most indwelling devices, once everything seals up, the last thing you want to do is have to go back in and remove it. So they tend to be permanent unless something bad happens where you have to remove it. So the whole thought was, design these things where the materials dissolve. Okay, so we looked at stents as an area. And specifically, we looked at the periphery. So let me ask everybody the questions again. You're part of my product development team in the audience. So stents were primarily designed, at least initially, to deal with the coronary, right? So to deal with the heart. But one of the great things about your heart is that it's pretty well protected, right, by bone, right, in this cavity. But blood vessels obviously extend all around the body. We all know this. And so a product that is designed to work well in a part of your body where there isn't a lot of risk for trauma from impact may not be the best product to have in a part of your body that there's a higher level of risk for impact. So for example, if you have a brittle metal device that can crimp and bend, and you have it in a coronary artery, what's the problem if you try to take that same exact product and put it in, say, a large artery in your leg? What would be some of the issues that you would be concerned with? I definitely have plants in the audience for this because I have someone who's been majorly responsible for designing the product in the audience right now. But she can't answer yet. Nevin said flexibility, that's right. That's one of the top three, Nevin. Why?
It's got to bend, it's got to be compliant, have the same modulus of elasticity as the tissue.
Yeah, so Nevin said flexibility, and he's exactly right. Right, so we know that, I'm walking around, and something as simple as sitting on the end of this desk and doing this takes this blood vessel, and at the very least, crimps it down, depending on where I've put that device. It may even put it in an angle. So the whole torsion and twisting in the blood vessel in your leg is much different than what we're going to experience, right, and in your chest, right? So if it was a metal product that was thin enough that bending would crimp, that would be a bit of a problem. What would be another thing that you would worry about?
With trauma, it could be dislodged, maybe.
Yep. So with trauma, it could be dislodged. And that's exactly right. What kind of trauma can you imagine?
Blunt force trauma, for example.
Yeah. So blunt force trauma. I like that. You're speaking like a medical doctor. That's a good one. So something as simple as I'm playing soccer with Anu. We're out playing soccer, and he gets overly aggressive and decides that he's going to tackle the ball and knees me, right? Innocent thing, right? But if I've got a metal product that's sitting in my blood vessel, that may not be the best thing in the world to happen. Or it could be something like my 9-year-old son being happy that I got home at a decent hour for once and hopping into my lap, and you never know what can go wrong, right? So you need a different type of product, and it turns out that in the periphery, where you're more exposed, that there are all sorts of mechanical reasons for wanting a different type of product. And in fact, let me just say the biology also in the periphery is in many cases quite different than in the coronary as we've learned. So, all right, so how do you revolutionize a product of this type? And let me stop before let me ask you again to be part of my product development group. All right, so what could we do instead of a metal? What are some of the things that come to mind as everyday products that would be able to hold a blood vessel open in principle and that you could learn from in design of an everyday? Don't think so heavy-duty medical right now. Think like everyday life. What are some things, materials, or products that you see every day, or at least you see every once in a while, that could give you some insight as to what to use instead of this metal, structure? Yep, I heard somebody say it. Rubber, that's right, exactly right. Something that's right, rubber. And be more specific, like what would you think of? You don't have to tell me a fancy type of rubber, but just what comes to mind when you think about, like what sort of thing in everyday life you something that recovers, exactly. So something that's rubbery that recovers. So exactly, rubber hose. That's exactly what I use as an example, right, when I'm describing it. Think about those garden hoses, at least the really good ones, that if you step on them, they recover and they come back. They don't permanently stay crimped. Think about the hoses in your automobile, that at least the ones that aren't super hard, right? That actually have some flexibility to them, right? So a rubber hose. So it's right underneath. When I describe this to you, it's almost going to sound obvious, right? So a rubber hose instead of a wire mesh because of all the complications, right? So let me click through, and let me show you a picture of the thing that looks like a rubber hose. So here is the mesh-like structure that we have. And for those of you who've never seen stents before, the stents are designed to be more mesh-like. They're not solid structures that that don't have holes in them. You deliberately have holes in them because you want the tissue to be able to grow through instead of having complete coverage inside of a blood vessel. So here's a blood vessel. This is typically what a metal stent looks like. In this particular case, in 480, the innovative side of the design was to actually to have something that looks like a braid. And in fact, if you take a look, it's essentially weaving in, a design around this product. So think about a rubber-like hose made out of a certain medical polymer that has enough resistance from the material and the design that it's made, but not too much that it doesn't give some give if you need to bend it or something sits on top of it. But one of the things that is also important, I mentioned it earlier, is what would you like to see happen once this product ends up fixing the problem? Biodegrade, right? You want it to disappear. I mean, ideally you want it to disappear, which is very difficult to do with metals. Not so difficult to do, comparatively speaking, with polymers. So it just gives you a whole nother benefit. Not only do you have better mechanical match to the peripheral arterial disease, you have a better material for it to disappear, right? Anyhow, so when we, let's see if I can get them all up here. When I look at the company right now, let me back up. I'll just tell you what the company is right now. It's got, I guess now, UPMA, we're up to 25 people. 25 people in human clinical trials. The data looks very good. And we're about to launch, and today we had a board meeting earlier, so we're about to launch another 2 clinical trials that are piggybacking off of what this product has created. So again, let me stop again and come back to since we had a platform as a theme, and think about financing in these life science companies. So I just picked the periphery as an example as the main product. Where else can you imagine wanting to use a product like this? Again, there's no wrong answer, and you guys have been great so far in coming up with ideas. In the neck, right? So you can think about using it in the carotid. But where else? Urology. It's very good. So think about getting out of blood vessels altogether. I heard someone say something. Oh, okay, build on that. Orthopedic surgery. A little more. In what way?
Every time, like if we implant some metal plates or something like that, you have to remove it. But if we can design the material which can resolve after, say, like 3 months or 4 months, that will be good.
Yeah, maybe these materials don't have to be used as tubes at all. Maybe that mesh structure could be used in part of an orthopedic procedure. What else? Any other?
You can almost imagine pediatric applications where the device it isn't persistent, but it can adapt with body's development. So that could open up pediatric-related indications.
Okay, so things with pediatrics, and pediatrics are actually particularly, there's something special about this device concept that would be really important in younger patients. What would it be?
It goes away.
It goes away, exactly. It goes away. And that's a major, that's a major thing. I mean, and that goes, by the way, for just generally speaking, ideally, the younger someone is, the more you want, whether it's the drug or the device, to have minimum exposure over time. So that's a major thing to think about as a pediatric platform. So Nevin said urology. So we got completely away from blood vessels. What other?
Post-surgical stabilization of tissues and organs that perhaps have been dislodged and need to be held in place afterwards.
I like that. So after surgery, organs get moved around, and after surgery, they need to be put back to where they, should have been in the first place, and they need to be stabilized long enough that they naturally stay there. And so you can imagine these materials being used for stabilization after surgery.
You mentioned clinical trials, right? So what's been the path? Because presumably then you've got some animal data, and that's expensive if it's large animal data. So how do you fund that as a startup or a virtual startup? But it sounds like you must have gotten some money in order to advance those.
So I'll give you some. So again, one of the reasons I'm bringing up different things you can do with the platform is it's a method of bringing in money. Now, make no bones about it. No matter what, this is expensive. Like, this is an expensive endeavor to put. This is about as expensive a medical endeavor you're going to get in terms of going into a blood vessel and leaving something in there that even if it disappears. So imagine that. Now, but the reality is there are ways you can partner with. We talked about the DoD. There's things you can do with the government to help get certain things paid for as part of the platform. There are collaborations you can do in other areas that may not be your main area, that you can give rights away to other areas, and getting large companies involved one way or another are important. So in this particular case, I can say, because the terms aren't completely disclosed, but this company has a deal with Medtronic. And so that helps as part of it. But imagine, again, everything I'm showing you is, imagine partnering in some area where, actually you asked the question before, where maybe what matters to you is to give away more of the upside in exchange for 3 times as much money that you can use on some other application, right? So I got to ask a couple of more questions on Nevin said urology. What other parts of the body have airways, right? So you can think about stuff in pulmonary. Yep.
Skin grafts, tissue grafts.
So, yep, in what way? What were you thinking about?
Burn victims. You need some structure, but most importantly, for something to disappear.
Yep. Maybe there's something you can do where eventually you want this material to disappear from burn victims.
How about gastric bypass, where you'd have a lap band that if you lost the requisite amount of weight would go away?
Yep. So GI applications, right? So in any case, again, if you notice, there's a reason that I'm bringing up the multiple applications, and it gets to a point where I want to, sort of summarize this part, and then I can take more questions. And that is, I think that in order to develop in today's environment, and maybe this will change in a few years, but it's challenging, and I love the question around how expensive some of this stuff is. It's challenging to convince investors, and in some cases employees, and maybe PIs, to want to go after companies in life sciences at times. And the closer you are to the therapeutic side, the more challenging it gets. And so you really got to think about clever business models and compelling cases around the technologies and concepts that you have. And if you can do that and show paths to where you can build a big company in a capital efficient manner, I think you've got a much better shot of getting these companies off the ground. And it could be, like was mentioned earlier, that you have a platform, you focus on one product. It could be you focus on one product to start, but you still maintain the platform and you roll it out. It could be that you've got a platform and you figure out how to do multiple products, you're really only doing 25% of the work because you've figured out how to collaborate around all these different applications that could be ported over. I see that as a way to develop what, first of all, offer an extremely rich value proposition to investors, but also a way to develop your business without relying 100% on equity dollars, which I can tell you at Northbridge, I don't have a single company that doesn't use this as a strategy. We have all of our companies in the life science space collaborating or getting customers really early. And our fund sizes are large. I think our funds are typically on the larger side of things. We have a $500 million fund. One before that is a $500 million, and one before that is $800 million. And I spend a lot of my time talking about capital efficient approaches. So you can only imagine someone with a $100 million fund is absolutely going to be thinking about capital efficiency. So let me stop there and take some more questions. Let me flip down. On anything, as we wind down a little bit, I know it's getting late.
Carmichael, you just kind of keyed something in my mind. So with a $500 million fund, typically when you guys are coming in, I don't know if it's a Series A or not, but what are you looking for in investment size? Because to put $500 million to work, it seems like it probably has to be a larger number than a few million or $5 million at a shot. Yeah,
no, it's a great question. So you often hear someone's got $500 million fund, $300 million fund, $800 million fund. It's a lot of money, whatever number it is. and you ask yourself, will they do? Let's exaggerate a little bit. Will they do a $100,000 investment? I mean, is it worth their time? I mean, the reality is, and it's not just Northbridge, but definitely Northbridge, we do this. We put in the amount of money that makes sense in order to get to the answer and turn that card over that lets us know whether the entrepreneur and us as investors, whether we're wasting our time or not. So I have, to be very specific, let's take the example I use. The first investment in MC10 was $250,000, right? I've got several other examples that I could have put up there, but I mean, I think that says enough right there, right? And now, later on, the next thing you know, you may figure something out and you write a check for $5 million. I mean, eventually, you're going to deploy enough money, but you deploy it at the time that when it's being spent, that you know it's not being spent on something that is different than what you thought it was at the time.
Carmichael, you talked a lot about indications and applications as a way to raise capital. What about geographies? What's your perspective for some of the smaller startups? It seems to be a constant struggle. Do I give away Europe or Latin America in order to stay viable?
Right.
What's your perspective?
Oh, I think you're right. I'm glad you brought that up. That's excellent. So besides giving away an entire application area, you can give away part of an application in certain part of the world, right? You can give. So for example, imagine that we just talked about 480 Biomedical. Imagine 480 Biomedical said, the way we're going to pay for our clinical trials is to do a deal in Japan, that we give away all the rights in Japan in exchange for $50 million. That's a pretty attractive deal, right? I mean, that kind of thing. So absolutely, I think geography is one of the ways you slice up what you're doing, and it depends, again, on how you do it. The key thing is you've got so many options. PJ said earlier, the key thing is to give yourself options, where even if you do something and you later on say, geez, I think I gave away more than what I'd like, you can recover. That you still have a very valuable business and you can develop it. And I think that comes from having more, not less. By the way, you can give away, but if you're going to do a single product company, the way you then can raise money is to do geography off of that single product. And by the way, there are also single product companies that have been fantastic. I just said I tend not to gravitate towards it. Okay, so I want to do one thing. PJ, can you come up for a sec? Oh, it's 5 minutes, I promise, towards the end here. So as much as I'm an entrepreneur, I'm really a VC right now. So I did want, PJ, just in a few minutes, tell people what you've been doing the last year and a half, and what you've experienced. And as it's easy, I could say it's easy for me from the standpoint of writing the checks and describing what I'm seeing. You're on the opposite side. What have you seen?
Yeah, so I'm a CEO and founder of a company called Alcyone Life Sciences. We closed our A round last March, and we got some
put your mic up higher.
Non-dilutive money from the state of Massachusetts. And then today, we just closed our first round for my second company, ArthroCAD, through an angel group, raised $500,000. So,
hot off the presses. Yeah.
See?
So how hard is it? I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and then you can. So let me say this. This is your first company being a founding CEO, right? Northbridge is not an investor at all in Alcyone, but I'm a supporter of PJ and the company. So I've watched you develop it. What's been harder than what you've imagined, and how have you solved some of the things?
So I think raising money for a first-time CEO is very hard. And I'll say this with a background that I had a chance to work with Carmichael, George, Bob, Jamie, and these guys, and I think it's been very hard. What it really does to an entrepreneur is to get them to be brutally realistic about your value proposition. Because as entrepreneurs, we fall in love with our idea. We think it's fundable, can do this. I've seen the other guy do it. But I think it's very hard. I think it's really important to take a step back and surround yourself with people who have done it, like Carmichael, which I had the opportunity, and to be very brutally honest about it. And what filters out is a very concise proposition that is fundable And then where that takes you is, where do you get the money from, right? Clearly, you know, I had a mentor and a friend at Northbridge. The easiest thing to say, well, I think this is a Northbridge proposition. It wasn't. We really have to find the right source for money.
So PJ has a company, just so I can fast forward on this thing so people know. The reason that Northbridge is not an investor is PJ has a company that it was clear that on $5 million or potentially less, that he could develop his medical concept, which is a delivery catheter that he's got that we won't go into in depth. There's just, no, it's a delivery system that on $5 million, I felt like he felt like he could get to a strong proof of concept and potentially even sell the company. Now at $5 million, and this gets to the question of, you know, how much money matters to even like a Northridge. My advice to PJ was, look, you know, raise $2 million and raise another $3 million, own a lot of the company, and then if you want to exit, even if you want to exit at 10 times what you've raised, if you take money from me, Northbridge owning, making $20 million on the sale of a company that we put $5 million into would, from my partner's perspective, would be a waste of my time. In fact, I would stop PJ from selling the company. I would tell him, you can't sell the company, buddy. You're going to have to build a much bigger company in order for us to justify being an investor. So it wasn't a match for Northbridge. So instead, who did you raise money from?
So the round was led by a small $100 million fund, and then basically super angels, people who made $1 billion and retired at the age of 50 and took about $100 or $200 million and wanted to invest in select companies. And basically they came in and co-led the round.
Yeah. So, and he didn't know any of these folks, and he had to go out and find them. So, even though PJ talks about how difficult, I watched him. And I wanted you to just come up and just you can put it down because I want to wind down so we don't keep people too late. Even though he says it wasn't easy, I think he did the right thing. It took time. It probably took you about a year, PJ, to be able to raise the money, and it's possible. But I think it sharpened your business model. And by the way, the way you could explain the business changed dramatically from like every 2 weeks when you kept getting a no. I think you got better and better until eventually you figured out how you got people to say the yes. And so I wanted to mention that a little bit because it's so much of Northbridge's sitting here with these big funds and some of the things that I've described. But in reality, I think some of the most interesting businesses are ones that Northbridge wouldn't back, but are still great businesses to develop, where some entrepreneurs like PJ was one of my first 5 people in that 480 Biomedical company that I mentioned, where he absolutely understood the VC side of stuff, but had to do something completely different in getting his Alcyon off the ground. And so which I think is 70% of the opportunities are more like yours, not the big company things. So let me stop there and try to wind down a little bit, maybe take a couple more questions and then call it a night because it's just getting on 8 o'clock and Jody told me 8 is the magic time for me. So, any other questions? We're good? Thank you. All right.